Now, today's reading comes from Daniel chapter 6 and verse 21, and it reads, "And Daniel answered, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouth of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, O king." Now, the story of Daniel is a very powerful story because the king favored Daniel above all his administrators, and he intended to put Daniel in charge of his kingdom. And the other administrators were envious of Daniel. And scripture tells us they tried to find fault in Daniel, but they could not find any fault with him because Daniel was not corrupt. Daniel was trustworthy. He was neither corrupt nor negligent. They understood that Daniel loved the Lord so much that the only way that they would find fault with Daniel is if Daniel was asked to break his God's laws. So they came up with this decree, and they made the king sign it, that for 30 days nobody was to worship any god or man other than the king himself. And the king signed it such that this decree could not be repealed, not even by the king himself. Now, scripture tells us that the king was determined to rescue Daniel, but he was unable. And this is the part that really spoke to me. That he was the king. He loved Daniel. He was ruler over the kingdom, but there was nothing he could do for Daniel. You see, with man, it is impossible. Jesus tells us this in Matthew chapter 19 and verse 26, that with man it is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Now, the king himself was not able to help rescue Daniel. And scripture goes on to tell us that the king was so distressed that he could not eat, he did not accept any entertainment, and he could not sleep because his heart was for Daniel. But there's another very powerful verse, Daniel chapter 6 and verse 16. King Darius says this to Daniel: "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." King Darius acknowledges that it is impossible for him, even with his status as the king, the ruler of the kingdom, it is impossible for him to rescue Daniel. But there is someone who can. There is someone to whom is not impossible to rescue Daniel, the God that Daniel continually serves. This takes me back to Jeremiah, where God asks, "Is there anything too difficult for me?" And sometimes we place our trust in human beings. We know someone who is influential and we think that they can help us. We know someone who is rich and we're having problems and we believe that they can come through for us. But I am here to assure you today that with man it is impossible. Man changes, man gets tired, but with God, nothing is impossible. God never changes. God will never leave you nor forsake you. God will never get tired of you. God is your helper. Even today, as we acknowledge that our help comes from God, and even as we intend to keep our eyes on God, keep in mind that this is the same God. Scripture tells us that God never changes. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. His mercies are everlasting from generation to generation, and so is his love. May this God, the same God that sent his angel to shut the mouths of the lions in the lion den for Daniel, may he shut the mouths of those lions for you. When Daniel was pulled out of the lion's den, not a scratch was found on him. Walk in God's ways, keep God's command, keep your trust and your eyes on God, for your help comes from God and God alone. My prayer for you is that God's love will surround you, that His peace will overwhelm you, and that His blessings will overtake you. Even as you believe and trust in God, keep the faith, feed the faith, and trust in God.